Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. I have decided for week 4, instead of using my traditional lecture videos I've been posting, I thought I would model a way to use PowerPoint to create a tutorial. And what I'm using is Screencast-O-Matic, which is an app I downloaded from the internet. There are many other applications. This is just the one that I happen to prefer. And what I've done is I've built in the slides in my information so that way I can go through and actually speak to you as I go through my presentation as if we were in the same room. You can do something similar to this by doing the screen and screen option, which means you can have your video on your computer showing you speaking on one side and then your PowerPoint or other presentation method on the other side. This works well with younger students because a lot of times they like to see the teacher talking. So again, just a new way to show and to model some different ways technology can be used. And of course, I'll then take this and upload to YouTube, which then makes it easier for sharing because video files or MP4 files are huge, and so many times you can't send those easily. So for example, if a child was sick and the parent would like notes for the day or what can I do to help my child catch up, you can easily send them a link to your tutorial if it's not something they have access to through other means like an online platform. In any case, the focus of this week is educational research, and we're going to be looking at that through 2 specific outcomes. And the first is we're going to reflect on what it means to share research, and as teacher researchers, what do we learn through the actual process of developing a study, conducting the study, analyzing the results, and the key piece, implementing the results. So to do action research, that's why it's called action research, because action is needed and action should be taken to solve a specific problem. We're also going to determine how action research influences change in our classroom practices and in teaching and learning through the lens of 21st century skills principles. So we want to keep in mind what it means to be a 21st century teacher and learner, as well as a practitioner. And by practitioner, I mean not just someone in education, I mean everyone using 21st century skills in the real world. In order to conduct action research, you have to assume the premise that an educator must be an active learner as well. And when we assume that role as the questioner, as we play devil's advocate to our own research or to the questions we have, we end up with a better final product. But along the way, there's some things that you need to ask yourself. So first of all, what should you change? What is worth the time for action research? If you're looking at something that's situational or this is a one-time occurrence, perhaps your time is not best suited for action research. However, if it's an ongoing issue, an ongoing problem, then that's when there really is the need for action research. So that may help you prioritize your ideas and thoughts. Then why should the status quo be changed? Why are we changing it? Could we do more harm than good if we change it? And can you justify potential changes with best practice, with possibly existing research? So for example, if your action research provides data that would contradict what we know to be about psychological development of children, if it would be something that could put students' development in jeopardy, could we justify making the changes that we've seen in our research? And how can you answer different questions with your data? Sometimes when we conduct research of any kind, we end up with information perhaps we didn't expect or I don't know what to do with. If you think in the case of medical research, many times researchers are trying to say, for example, they're trying to look for a cure for cancer, but in the process, they discover a cure for the common cold. The cold wasn't their target focus, but that's something that just came out of the research. So it's important to be looking for different ways to use the data and how we can answer different questions. Sometimes the data doesn't answer our question, or it creates more questions that need answers. And so this is where we have to go back and revise or conduct a brand new study. And so those are things that you have to ask yourself. Is this a revision instance, or if this is a recreation instance? But more importantly, if you look at these 5 questions, which these aren't the only questions you could ask yourself, but these are the primary ones when you're doing research. If you think about what you've been asked to do in this course in terms of revising your lessons or previous projects, you're asking yourself these same questions. So part of what you're doing in this course is preparing you to go into the world of education as an active learner, as an action researcher, and be able to make significant changes that promote teaching and learning in the best interest of all students. Your text defines action research as a systemic study of a real-life problem in context with the goal of intervening into that problem. And notice the goal of intervening into that problem. That's why it's called action. Something has to happen. Now, part of action research, I know many people, I don't want to do research, and I've heard many colleagues say they don't want to get a dissertation or get a doctorate because they don't want to do the dissertation, which is an extended research project, of course, and process. But if you think about what we expect from students and what we are teaching them from K through 12, you'll find that you are better prepared and more knowledgeable on the subject than perhaps you've given yourself credit. So if we start very basic, take a look at the image on the screen and you see the writing process. If you notice, it's starting, when we write, we start with a topic, we start with a prompt, we start with a reason for writing. And we go through all of the steps until we reach our final document where we've answered that question. We've satisfied the purpose for writing. But through that, if you look at these arrows, they are in all different directions, reinforcing the fact that this is a process and it's typically cyclical. And if you notice, revision is a huge part of it. The same is true of the scientific method. We start with a problem. We come up with questions. What questions do we have that emerge from that problem? How can we go about correcting that problem? How do we gather data? What do we know about the data once we get it? How do we reflect and refine and expand and alter? And again, notice the arrows. It's a cyclical process, and there's a point where you've got to go back in order to go forward. This applies to STEM lessons. If you look at the way that STEM lessons should be created and where students devise solutions to real-world problems, they're starting, notice, defining the problem. There's the research. We're using imagination. There's our creative thinking. We've got communication built into this. So you can see many of those 21st century skills are built into a STEM lesson. So if any of you are at STEM schools or STEM certified, this is part of action research as well. As someone in an IB school, we use the design cycle. Again, if you take a look in the center, you see depth of knowledge, you see all of those thinking skills, transfer skills, and going through what already exists in terms of products, outcomes, thinking, ideas. What do we need to change it? How do we make it better? Once we've created it, is it what we needed it to do? Do we need to go back and revise? You've learned through this program and other programs, this is how you think about lesson design. What do I need my students to learn? So we're starting at our standards. What do we do? How do we plan it? How are the kids going to get there? What does that actually look like? How do I know if my students have mastered? How do I report and communicate and share those results with my colleagues or other stakeholders? Again, notice our arrows. Reflection, ongoing evaluation of our progress is included in what we do in lesson design. So you can see how this is translating. It's not any different than a child being asked to complete a project. If we go into the business world and we look at a project management plan, again, we see there's a problem. We have to figure out how we're going to address the problem. What exactly do we need? How do we implement it? How do we go back and refine it as needed? And then how do we actually use that information in the real world? And so you can see that this directly applies to what we want children to be able to do in the real world and what is expected of you as a teacher leader, as an action researcher in terms of teaching and learning. So some themes across each of those models, just to summarize: action research and everything we saw is a continual process. It's designed to answer or address a specific problem. The outcome is predicted but flexible. Typically in action research, you have some idea of the type of information or data you're going to get, but sometimes the data surprises us. It's not at all. So you have to be flexible in terms of analyzing that data and make sure that you're coming from a very objective standpoint. Evaluation is included. Is our evaluation or research model the best one possible for this particular question? Did we implement it with fidelity? Have we begun to implement the results in a way that makes sense? So we need to make sure we're always assessing our status. Reflection is required at every point. There's no point in being an educator where you stop reflecting on your current and past practice and see how that can shape what you'll do in the future. And the same is true of action research. So I'm hoping these themes will help connect what we've done in the past few lessons, as well as what you've done in your program, and help you move into action research analysis and help you look at your study in a new light. See you in the classroom.